And, it's easy to hit the left, right? It's so easy. They've ruined everything, right? And all this ABCs of gender and wokeness and race and all this stuff has been a disaster for education. So we got to get rid of all that. But there are not enough conservative cities on a hill either, right? The church has not been doing its proper work. So it's one thing to moan and groan, but conservatives, we need to do better. And so part of this is on us, right? The kids are running around with phones doing whatever, digital gizmos. But no one's reading the Bible. No one's reading Plato's Republic. No one even knows what they are. No one knows what a republic is. No one knows what a free market system entails. No one knows the Constitution. And so it's a heavy project. And so I want to return all of it to the states. And so saying you're going to get rid of the federal is no problem to me.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
Joining us today is a man who has a lot of experience on the business and accounting front, as well as in politics and education. Dave Brat is the Vice Provost for Education and Public Relations at Liberty University, and we're going to be talking with him about the state of the U.S. economy, the very high likelihood of change blowing in with the new Trump administration in the economy, the government itself, and what it may mean for the future of education. Before we get into that conversation, let me read the scripture of the day. It's Ephesians chapter 2, verses 7 through 9. And it says, "For it was the gracious gift from God that brought us to Christ. So no one will ever be able to boast, for salvation is never a reward for good works or human striving." And we are the visible display of the world of the infinite riches of the grace and kindness of Jesus. That means the world can see that we're different and see that there's something very different about us. They can see that the divine has touched our lives and even lives inside of us. And the world should be perplexed when they encounter us because they can see that God has changed us. And when they do see that difference, it's nothing that we can brag about. All we can do is say in humility that salvation is a gift from the Lord. And as Chris often reminds us, even the gift of faith is a gift from God.
So very true, Danielle. And I love the phrase visible display. If we woke up tomorrow morning and let's just say we were all struck mute, but we could still move and we, still had our bodily movements, could still make gestures, could still live our lives, other than the fact that we couldn't speak. They are supposed to know we are Christians by our love. They're supposed to be able to look at us, at how we act, and know, man, there's something different about these people. I want a part of this, even if we never said a word. So I love the idea that we are the visible display of the kingdom of God on earth. That is so powerful. As you said, Danielle, Dave Brat, and by the way, Dave has a PhD in economics from American University, which is just an outstanding school, so clearly has the background to talk to some of the issues that we're going to talk about today. Dave, thank you for joining us on the State of Freedom today.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. I went to Princeton Seminary. I thought you were going to go that route when we're getting all Ephesians on us, but that was great. Thank you, Danielle.
Yeah, my pleasure.
It's Princeton is certainly no slouch. But anyway, I want to start off at the top here, Dave, with the Biden apparently has now authorized the Ukraine to launch missiles into the interior of Russia, obviously leading to a major potential international escalation. What are your thoughts on this, particularly how it may develop and its potential impact on Trump's economic agenda here?
Yeah, well, my thoughts would take a few minutes to develop, but in short, I'll just state a few things that the listeners may not know. The United States and our CIA did a coup d'etat on Ukraine in 2014. That makes all the difference. Go listen to John Mearsheimer at University of Chicago, one of the best political realists in the world. Told you roughly everything that's coming since 2008, 2014, and every year since. And so in addition to that, we had a peace plan put on the table by Putin in 2022, and the U.S. and NATO said no to that peace plan. And so with that said, the thing that I think is people really need to think about this. Why are we doing this? We're allowing our weapons to shoot over there. There's 1 million dead Ukrainian boys laying on the ground already, dead and injured. That's horrific. And then you start hearing about the rare earths and the minerals and the breadbasket of the world and BlackRock buying property and building back what we just destroyed, and oil and gas deals worth billions over on the east side, right, in the Crimea and the Donbass. And that makes you scratch your head, because those territories to the east voluntarily said, hey, we're going to be independent, or we're going to go over with Russia. And then that instigated our being aggressive. And so this is at a point in time when Biden, my friend Congressman Scott Perry, has the receipts of checks from China in the hands of the Biden family regime. So this is not theoretical. These are facts on the ground. These are receipts. And it's just, unfortunately, politics is always about money and power, the opposite of the gospel, the opposite of the humility of Christ. But it's incumbent on us to do God's will in every square inch, right, of our callings in every part of the world. And so now I don't think Putin's going to go in full. There's rumors of nukes and all that, but he's going to have to do something to save face. And then the key will be, if Trump's making a phone call today, maybe the biggest thing he can do publicly to win is to do nothing to NATO. They're poking the bear. They're still poking the bear. They need to, tell their friends. Soros Jr. came out today after the nuke news and said, this is a great day. And so, there's a group of people who have perverse incentives here. And maybe the strongest move of Putin and Trump is to make peace.
Yeah. Following up on that, Dave, what specifically are the perverse incentives?
Yeah, well, it's, the globalists have a very strange worldview. They do not have the Christian worldview that every individual is made in the image of God. Otherwise, you can't go to war and treat people like animals and have a million dead people. You'd be crying, right? He should be crying. That's the proper response to the news on the ground. And so the perverse incentives have, control and power. The globalists want control. They've used NATO to gain that control. NATO's not even a war-fighting machine. And we're paying the full bill, and we basically run it, right? We've run all the post-World War II, Bretton Woods, liberal order institutions, the World Bank, the IMF, the United Nations, NATO. None of them move an inch without the U.S. Giving the go-ahead. So any of these NATO moves are just Biden moves right now. And it just makes you sick to our stomach. I mean, this is just part of the tale, right? I mean, we've had censorship. We've had a media blitz on the Kamala front that we've had the State Department, the DOD, Department of Homeland Security, all teaming up. They own and purchase advertising at all the mainstream news outlets. You've got the Atlanticists, the Atlantic Charter. You've got all the NGO cutouts, CIA cutouts, et cetera. And so go listen to Mike Benz. Tucker interviewed him twice, about 8 months ago and a month ago. And if you want a detailed account of everything that's wrong in the universe, that's it. And then in comes Trump with 2 assassination attempts. And he's our best chance, right, of restoring some sense of reality back to this very fallen world.
Yeah. And Dave, as you were talking, I was struck because I've been looking at a lot of what Mike Benz is putting out lately. And if you want to have a very clear-eyed view of the state of our country's nefarious behavior in the world, go look at what Mike Benz is saying on Twitter. What do you think Trump is going to have to do to unravel that? I think in some parts, in some ways, he has built those relationships over time already with these world leaders and has an understanding that he's not a part of the globalist deep state regime spearheaded basically by the U.S. State Department, it seems, according to Mike Benz and the CIA. But he's got his work cut out for him, and he's got to have some really astute people in place to be able to peel out of some of those places where our country, has done a lot of damage.
Yeah, that's right. And so the good news is the left, they're all diving into the NGOs, the Harvard think tanks, and they're all going to, go from the institutions and dive into all those, but they don't control the institutional levers of power anymore, right, in the government. And so that's a big, big win. And so what do? I think the most help will come from Elon Musk and Vivek, because they don't have to go through the budget process, right? They can reorg a company and do HR moves and just strip out entire divisions or agencies or even departments if they choose to in the executive branch. And that's where most of the problem is. So yeah, Trump knows he has to move quickly on this. He knows what happened back in 2016. The Washington Post was writing pieces to get rid of him as president of the United States the day before he was sworn in. So that's what you call the deep state, right? You don't even give someone a chance to see what their track record's going to look like. And so there's all sorts of other stuff they can do. As I just said, the U.S. leads all those global institutions as well. They don't move without us, right? And already we've seen moves in Yemen, et cetera, and the gunfire's down. Some of the radical groups know the game's over, but Biden is just trying to trigger Putin right now for a grand finale of just total corruption. It's sick. There's no good outcome. The only narrative they have is that, we're stopping Russian aggression and Russia was going to overtake all the rest of, Europe or some craziness where there's zero evidence for that proposition.
Yeah.
Like Russia went across for one reason. It's just like our Monroe Doctrine. If we had communists in Mexico, we'd say, no, thank you. And then we poked the bear and now you get the natural outcome.
Yeah.
And we rejected, of course, we rejected the peace deal in 2022, which we have to remember also.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's a big piece of evidence.
Well, I hope some of these last minute moves will turn around and become huge traps that they are, of their own making that they fall into. But to pick up on your point of Elon and Vivek and Doge, Elon's recently said, I guess he said it really on the campaign trail, that he thinks he could cut $2 trillion from the federal budget. What do you think about that? Is it feasible? What's your dream of what you would want to see from a Doge?
Right. I think he can save a ton of money, but he can't do it from the budget, right? We just had a blow up, right, with some of my buddies in the Freedom Caucus and the past speaker, McCarthy. McCarthy went up and gave Biden a $7 trillion woken weaponized budget without the permission of Congress. And Mike Johnson signed off on similar. And so the idea that you're going to get the House and the Senate to go along with steep spending cuts with their signatures there, no way, Jose. But that Doge, what they can do, the reorg, right? And you look at most businesses or universities or government, 70, 80% of the bill is payrolls for personnel. So, and if you start doing the math, right, the $100,000 slots up there multiplied by the tens of thousands, if you include the consultants, it's in the hundreds of thousands per DOD alone. State Department, I think, has 75,000 somewhere, and that's not including consultants.
Yeah.
So you start doing the math on a reorg, and you're in some big numbers. If they get anywhere near $1 trillion, I'll be very proud and happy.
Yeah.
And it's just returning money to the budget at that point. It's just saying the spending is cut off. It's not not necessarily cutting the budget itself.
Right. Yeah. And I guess the other thing you can add is on the budget side, Congress may approve that money, but then the president can put pressure on people not to spend all of it. Right. So, they vote for it to save their political hides, which is an embarrassment for Republicans. It's just,
it is.
I voted against the budgets and in committee. I was on the budget committee back when it was $800 billion. Right now it's $2 trillion in deficit spending, which is stimulative, propping up a fake stock market. And you have not heard anything on the real, on the fake news media right across the board.
Yeah. So Dave, so to be clear here on your point, while Doge certainly can't cut off the appropriations, only Congress can do that. They can make those appropriations unnecessary through radical downsizing and reorganization. That's what you're saying.
We are so honored to be affiliate partners for General Michael Flynn's movie, Flynn, Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost. Support General Flynn and the State of Freedom by shopping the Flynn Movie Store directly from the button on our homepage at freedomstate.us or through our affiliate link, flynnmovie.com/TSOF podcast. On that site, you can purchase the DVD, which comes with a streaming link. You can pick up Flynn movie merchandise and get his complete 5GW book series.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah. I want to switch for a second here to the education. Linda McMahon, appointed education secretary. Your thoughts on this, and also Trump's suggestion, which I believe he made, correct me if I'm wrong, about possibly phasing out the Department of Education entirely. What are your thoughts on the McMahon appointment and on the possibility of phasing out DOE?
Yeah, well, you got to be careful because, the left uses this, we're a bunch of thugs and we just want to blow stuff up and destroy stuff. And that it's the wrong word. We want creative destruction, but we want to restore the founding vision of a constitutional republic. So that it's a constructive move of a time when things used to work. Now everything's been politicized precisely because all these checks come from D.C. I ran in Richmond. It used to be red, right? All the checks, though, started flowing down that Highway 95, and now we're blue state because of the checks and the money. And so, what did you want me to get at in this one again? Say it again real quick, Chris.
I just wanted to get your brief thoughts on the Linda McMahon appointment.
Linda McMahon, yep,
and
good.
And also about whether or not the country could do without a federal Department of Education.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Linda McMahon, she came to our CEO summit that I run last year at Liberty. Loved our kids. She's a great, CEO, strong leader. And then she's going to have a ton of the good experts around her. But yes, the intent, I think I read a thing the other day. I hope it's true. It sounded true. But the U.S. was number one in education back in 1979 before the DOE. Then you get the DOE and we're ranked down 30, 40, whatever we are in the world, right? 11% of the kids, the poor kids in Chicago, can read at the third grade.
Wow.
11% literacy. That's the Illinois Policy Institute. You can go look it up. 88% illiteracy in Chicago for the poor kids. And so, if I was a secretary, I would aim all firepower at literacy. And, it's easy to hit the left, right? It's so easy. They've ruined everything, right? And all this ABCs of gender and wokeness and race and all this stuff has been a disaster for education. So we got to get rid of all that. But there are not enough conservative cities on a hill either, right? The church has not been doing its proper work. So it's one thing to moan and groan, but conservatives, we need to do better. And then ultimately, consultants in higher ed, I've seen reports, education doesn't make it in the top 10 concerns of students or their parents when choosing a university, right? It's everything other than reading books and learning, right? It's the football team, and do you have a good reputation, and do you got a good network and all this? And so part of this is on us, right? The kids are running around with phones doing whatever, digital gizmos, but no one's reading the Bible. No one's reading Plato's Republic. No one even knows what they are. No one knows what a republic is. No one knows what a free market system entails. No one knows the Constitution. And so it's a heavy project. And so I want to return all of it to the states. And so saying you're going to get rid of the federal is no problem to me. The only thing that's increased, right? The Nobel level economist at University of Chicago has worked on this whole Eric Hanushek, if you want to go look. When you get old, you get to write the obvious graph. So one thing on the graph goes like that. That's spending. At the bottom, all these flat lines, like your heart rate's flatlined, those are test scores, right? So spending is skyrocketed. All the test scores are flat as a pancake. And then there's one intermediate line in the middle going straight up too. And that's the bureaucratic jobs, not the teachers. And so all of that has accompanied flat test scores. So it doesn't take a genius to see you've got to get rid of that sclerosis and all the regulation and just aim all firepower at the poor third graders. Because if you can't read at the third grade, you can't go on and read and comprehend the rest of the grades. But without reading, you're done. And so, yeah, I'm all in favor of all of it. I've done education my whole life. K-12 needs to be unleashed as well from the shackles and the teachers' unions. They're responsible for the outcomes. At some point, you have to say they're responsible. And they've got every excuse. Well, we got to deal with all these special type of students, and the Congress has imposed these burdens on us. Well, I don't hear them fighting to get out from underneath the shackles.
Yeah. And speaking of the shackles, you mentioned all the funds that are flowing into I-95. It's something that we experience in Louisiana. You know, we've talked to several state legislators here about the need to cut the purse strings because they essentially become puppet strings that cause our legislators to dance like little puppets and do whatever the feds want. So do you see that being, really a true return to federalism being part of the plan here and part of the way forward? I just think that some of these funds have to stay at home if we want to see the turnaround that we're looking for.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And, we just got done going through COVID and that scare and censorship. And for those who haven't followed Mike Benz, the NGOs from the government blob, as he calls it, State Department, DOD, they're so powerful, they shut down Zuckerberg, right? He's a couple-digit billionaire, and they brought him to his knees with public pressure. The CEOs, I run CEO summits, get to know a lot of CEOs across the country, et cetera. They won't say a word, right? They have all had to go along with the DEI, ESG. Most of them don't want to go, but they did go along. And now Robby Starbuck, go follow him if you don't know who he is. He's been putting pressure on these companies one by one. And he's a Christian guy. He goes to him first and says, hey, my aim here isn't to harm you, but my aim is to get you to get back to neutral. Quit doing this politics.
Yeah,
with your company, just go build tractors or whatever. And so he's unilaterally told them, look, I'm gonna uncover what you're doing here unless you want to turn it around. And some of them have just turned it around point blank.
He's seen a lot of success.
Trump win, that's going to restore something, right? It's restoring some strength. But like you said, the money people in New York City, for example, I had a buddy tour me around the. And he just told me the percentage of people are getting a city check, a state check, a federal check, it's over half. And if it's over half, it's very hard to vote against your own self-interest.
It is. It is. In fact, in recent days, I've thought that if you get a government check that you didn't pay into, then you absolutely should not have the right to vote because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Anyway,
For sure.
Sorry, Chris.
I know. I wish we could somehow link the two.
Yeah. One of our state senators here who we had on not too long ago was talking about, we had a very good discussion with him about the connection between a return to real state sovereignty and state autonomy and the connection to all the federal money. And that until we get off the federal teat and stop relying on so much federal subsidies and federal money constitutionally, it's going to be very difficult for states to return to the kind of sovereignty that they really do have and that are reserved to them under the 9th and 10th Amendments. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, obviously we're all for that, but it is hard, right? That Genesis 3, we didn't cover earlier in the show, but that's the fall, right? With the snake and the apple and the devil. And unfortunately, the smart people have learned it's not that hard to get your hands on a monopoly. If you get one line of code written into the state budget where you're the sole supplier, or you're given sole property rights or sole rights to distribute a product or service, or into the federal government, you're very wealthy, you're very rich, versus hustling out in the private market versus 1,000 competitors, where you got to make a better product than 1,000 competitors. That's capitalism. And so you just ask yourself right now, unfortunately, right, patriotism and religiosity have fallen 35 points in the last 5 years, according to Wall Street Journal. Polling about a year ago. It just shocked everybody, but it's not that surprising. And so, this republic was made for moral people. It's easy to say that phrase, but all these moral people aren't taught any morality in K-12 education for the first 13 years of their lives. There's not one ethical system taught. And I used to teach ethical stuff in school. They'll say, well, we teach love and respect and all. That's not an ethical system.
Right.
Right. And then the secular ethical systems are Aristotle and Kant, the utilitarians. And I taught those for 20 years. They're great. They twist your mind, and it's fun to do critical thinking, and they're fun. You can contrast them with the Judeo-Christian tradition. But it dawned on me about 20 years after teaching them, they have no followers, right? But 7 billion people on the planet are religious and live out religious systems. And so social science is supposed to be studying the same reality. And the anthropology folks and the sociology folks, they're ignoring the 7 billion, right? They focus on the 1 billion who are non-religious, or the atheists, or the people that are in rebellion against God, which is a large number. But that's what we're talking about here, right? It really does come back to always God is the first principle, right? And then human nature, it follows right from that view. And then that tells you the degree of the lift you got in front of you. And so we have been decaying, living off the fruits of our grandparents and great-grandparents who worked the black church. You just think of the black church, those parents suffered for their kids, sacrificed greatly to give them this day. Same with whites and Hispanics and et cetera. And now we're living easy, and we're not as willing to make those sacrifices as past generations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dave, about the churches, you said something a minute ago that intrigued me, that the church is not doing its job. That seems to be a common thing.
Yeah.
Where is the institutional church, particularly the church leaders? Where are they failing when it comes to vigorously engaging the culture?
They're AWOL, right? There's some notable exceptions, but the vast majority.
Why?
Well, unfortunately, it's tied to that discipline story I just told you about. People don't want to hear the old Jonathan Edwards, sinners in the hands of an angry God. That doesn't go over so hot anymore. It should. I think if I ever write a book, its title will be Hell. Keep it short and sweet and to the point. But without that system built in, and that is built in, every civilization for all of humanity has known about that. Everyone has posited, if there's a good, there's a hell, and we have to head toward the good life. So what the church instead is preaching all the easy stuff to the choir, right? And I don't mean to be anti-religious here. I'm not. I'm boring, Orthodox, Presbyterian, frozen, chosen, whatever. But everybody's preaching the gospel message of salvation and forgiveness of sins, which is absolutely essential. It was in the Ephesians right there, all by grace alone from God. But then they keep preaching that same thing every week to the choir.
Exactly.
Instead of preaching what was even a more dominant when it comes to space is how do you build the kingdom of God on earth, right? It's in the Lord's Prayer, our kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. And even heaven's not some poofy place, according to the biblical scholars. It's the new heaven and the new earth. It will be on earth. Right? And it will be with bodies. And the church has spiritualized everything. We got a bunch of Gnostics running around. We've spiritualized everything. We get pietistic because that is easier in some respects than having to build the kingdom, right? And getting down, the Jews are much more earthy, right? You got God down in the garden playing in the mud, creating us, right? I like that picture. We need to get back to more of that picture. And while I'm on that, Christology back 30 years ago, everything went toward Jesus. Well, and there's no replacing Christ is the foremost, best revelation of who God is. But Jesus also said, I'm only here to do the Father's will. Where's the Father gone in the church? Where's God, the Father Almighty, right? And the wrath of God in the Ark of the Covenant and all those stories. So I could go on, but the church ain't preaching that. Let me tell you that. And as a result, we have a flawed theology. We got a flawed anthropology. We got a flawed psychology. We got flawed education. And it all comes, everything, right? Culture is downstream from religion. And then politics is downstream from culture. And then policy is downstream from politics. So if you don't got the top thing right, you're messed up all the way through.
Yep. I couldn't agree with you more.
I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker Get to shopping. That helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at Danielle@freedomstate.us for more information.
Let me pick up for a moment on what you said earlier about critical race theory, socialism, these Marxist ideals that are being injected into the school system. We've seen it. I mean, really, the exposure of it came out during COVID when parents had to sit through those classes and understand the just perversity that children are being taught. The DEI stuff as well. It's from the elementary all the way. We've seen it's even in the military and higher ed. How do we? What's it going to take to root out the tentacles of this now that it's so embedded into the textbooks and even the teacher trainings?
Yeah, it's I got a pretty similar answer as to what I just got done yakking about.
Yeah.
But I got a buddy, I was on the War Room, hosting that, so I get all these smart guys. I got a major theologian sends me this book from Switzerland. He's Harvard-trained and Swiss theologian, Jack Brush. He wrote a book called The Wrath That Came, right? The wrath that has already come. And that's what you're talking about, right? It's a fundamental, we're not deep in theology anymore. Sin, right, in Genesis 2:3, and then in Jesus and in St. Paul is a rebellion against God the Father, right? Sin is that rebellion. We've thinned that down to talk about sins, right? I did this sin, I did a bad thing, I did this sin. Well, you can fix those sins and then you can think you're in okay shape. I'm not a sinner, right? I fixed my sins. No. And so you asked me about all this DEI stuff and the neo-Marxists who are obviously in rebellion against God. And so what is it? That's what it is. If you give up on Christianity or Judaism or your religious system, if you give up on the belief in God, what are you left with? Your God, right?
Yeah.
Your God. You can define sexuality, education, the military, anything the way you want to. And so it's, in my view, if you don't restore that first, right? This rebellion against God, you just see it in the kids. If you're on TikTok, you see things on narcissism every 5 seconds. We got a runaway ego culture. We're all prone to it. I was a politician, right? So it's not like I'm some holy guy preaching at you all. I'm just telling you what I see when I read a newspaper and when I look in the mirror.
Yeah.
I wake up in the morning thinking about me, right? I should not do that. And so that's.
Yeah.
So, Dave, your point about rebellion against God, that being the primary sin of man is rebellion against God. So when you talk about the possibility of leading basically a sin-free life or a relatively sin-free life, and yet it's still possible to be living in a state of perhaps intellectual rebellion against God. The Pharisees, you could say, on the outside were perfectly clean and they looked perfectly appropriate, this surface propriety that they had. But Jesus said, inside, you're a brood of vipers. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Because that's exactly. That's very good. That's exactly what I mean. It's a matter of the heart, right? David.
Yeah.
God loved King David because he had a good heart, and we're never going to be close to perfect, right? The Pharisees they thought they could approximate that, and Jesus was like, "Are you kidding?" And none of us can. In a day, in an hour, we're all completely self-absorbed, and so the Pharisees of today are the pietists who think if you don't do a couple things, you're good. I mean, you got to be kidding me, right? That's the shallowest thing I ever heard in my life. All the great thinkers or philosophers or theologians, they know the basics, right? And the basics are built in the church creeds. And so a lot of this is more a matter of the heart, like you just said. And the way to solve that is through prayer to God, right? And there's that, I just heard Tucker with a guy from Allo. Go look at that interview. If y'all want to get a sense of what we're talking about here, go out, download that thing, Allo, on your phone and spend a few minutes with God, right? And it's not about your sins or what you do. It's about trying to know God, right? God loves you. God loved Israel. And Christ loves every individual is made in God's image. And so it's a matter of being thankful to God. If you're thankful, that's the best sign. If you smile a lot and you're truly thankful, that's probably a good sign that you get something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. And I love that you brought out the fact, I mean, the more that I study and the more that I get close to the Lord, the more I realize that what the world needs is a revelation of Jesus, a personal revelation of Jesus that causes them to do something, not the navel gazing that our current religious culture teaches us, but the looking up, the looking up, the looking out, and
Yeah.
the work. Like you said, the kingdom of God is doing the work. It's, all of Jesus's parables, we're talking about fishing, we're talking about farming, they were talking about work. And I don't think that our work is going to cease whenever we're in a new heaven and a new earth. I think we'll still have things to do because that's what we were built for. We were made with a purpose, and purpose requires action, not being, but doing.
No, that's well said. We were working in the garden before the fall.
It just wasn't so
right?
hard.
So we were made to work. And part of this pietism, Luther and some of the greats and Calvin and whatever were big on the calling and your work ethic and the Protestant work ethic and all that. And it doesn't matter what you do with your life. You have a calling from God. Do it well. And in that, you'll find happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
And
speaking
indeed,
about
faith of... Go ahead, Danielle.
Oh, sorry, Chris. I was just
No,
going to
go
say,
ahead.
speaking about walking in your purpose, would you tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Liberty and why you think it's a great option for parents who want their kids to walk in their purpose, who want a conservative education, who want the values that they cherish to be instilled in their kids at that next higher level?
Yeah, sure. No, thanks for the question. Harvard's motto in 1640 was truth for Christ and church. So was Princeton and Yale, and all the publics all had Protestant presidents and boards and everything. You can go read back until even a couple 100 years ago, then 100 years ago. So this was widespread, and it was all, these are the smartest people in the world. So they thought through this Judeo-Christian tradition and formulated Orthodox theology, et cetera. All that to say, Liberty University has not changed from that fundamental doctrine, right? Truth for Christ and church. And if that is not in the mission statement of other universities you're looking at, that may be the factor you want to look at that separates Liberty University from others. So I was the dean of the business school, and I had great students there, and we had fun. I'd walk into class, start yelling at them, and seeing if they knew who Adam Smith was or where China is on a map, and just busting their chops and having good fun. But we'd have events, and it'd come time to tear down the place and clean up and whatever. I had students come up to me after events and say, "Hey, Dr. Brat, is there anything I can do to help out? Can I help clean up? Can I?" And I was like, I've never seen that anywhere. I've been around the world a couple times, right? And I was not like that in college. I don't know if I'm that good today. So that right there is kind of instilled in me what's special. These kids, truly, I haven't heard one in 6 years, not one racial, gender, nasty thing from a student to a student in my years here.
Wow.
So that's pretty remarkable.
That is remarkable. That is remarkable. And I think what a lot of people don't understand, to your point, Dave, is that Liberty University is much closer and conducts itself with much greater fidelity to the original vision of Princeton and Harvard and institutions like that than they themselves do. Right. And they have really gone off the rails, no question about it. But I've heard wonderful things about Liberty. I've got a couple of young sons, so it's on the table.
Yeah, that's right. And for those interested in the history of ideas, I always recommend, there's a book called The Soul of the American University, From Protestant Establishment to Established Non-Belief by Marsden. Go skim that. But then I also love Bloom's Closing the American Mind, Allan Bloom.
Great book.
And there's a new one out by a Catholic writer. He was editor of First Things, Reno, Reno. And he does a shorter paperback book. His book's called Return of the Strong Gods. And if you like the history of thought, read that one. That'll get your attention real quick. And it's kind of summarizing what we're talking about right here.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Very, very interesting. Dave, how can people follow you, first of all, and how do people learn more about Liberty University?
Yeah, just go Google Liberty. We got 16,000 students residentially here. They all worship together live. 16,000 Wednesday and Friday mornings together in a gigantic auditorium with music you can't believe and all that. And then we have 140,000 total students, right? So people may not know that. We have every program under the sun. We got D1 sports teams. I play with a tennis team, and they destroy me every couple of weeks I can't even walk when I get off the court. But I'm available at Brat Economics on Getter, and you'll find an email there. But go look at those economic charts. I haven't posted it in about a month, but you haven't missed anything because they're all just the substantive economics.
Yeah.
Issues that have been with us for decades that are not going to go away anytime soon. So Brat Economics on Getter, you'll see an email there. You can contact me and us at Liberty there as well.
Yeah. Is it safe for me to assume that Liberty University teaches Milton Friedman?
Yeah. Milton. And I hate to say anything bad about Uncle Milty because I love him. He's Chicago, head of monetary theory. But in that book I just referenced, our Reno, Return of the Strong Gods, it's interesting, though, that Friedman and Hayek were chosen by the modernists and allowed to be represented across the board because they did not have a theological foundation.
Wow.
Right?
Interesting.
So I love his economics, and I'm not going to go into detail, but there's a school of thought. Karl Popper was the philosopher of falsification was school, and Milton Friedman tried to solve this problem of logical positivism, and that school of thought fell apart because we don't have any knowledge of theoretical terms. Like, have you ever seen a science? Right? And so science itself falls apart. They were trying to get rid of God with that. You don't have any sense perception, taste, touch, smell, sight of God. Therefore, he's not real. The same thing applies. Have you ever seen a hypothesis? If you have, let me know what one looks like. And so all that comes crashing down. Read that book, Return of the Strong Gods. But it's safe to say, yes, we like free markets because we like freedom. And the Western Protestant countries in Europe set up the architecture for human freedom, for the rule of law, for private property rights, via the last Nobel Prize in economics last week, all because of one proposition. We believe that every individual is made in the image of God. The rest of it flows from that when you're in the political realm.
Well said. And as Benjamin Franklin said, a republic, ma'am, if you can keep it.
That's it. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Well, God bless you, Dave. We really enjoyed having you on today. What a great discussion. And we look forward to having you back on at some point in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Chris and Danielle. That was a super interview. That's A+. Thanks for doing this.
God bless.
Thanks for joining us today on The State of Freedom. Be sure and check out the show notes for this episode. You can always go there and find the calls to action and resources mentioned in the show. And you can find out more information about our advertisers there as well. If you want to learn more about us or support our work, visit freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org. We'll see you next time. God bless.